Welcome, everybody. Kevin Marino here. We have some special guests tonight. We have some amazing folks on the line, leaders in the field, leaders in the industry, just leaders in general, coming here, making sure they get the latest and the greatest and the top information that is out and available about an amazing new project here, and that is the Solar Oil Project. And we have with us tonight none other than one of the owners himself, a gentleman that I've come to know here over the last very little bit of time. We have not run across each other before, but I'll tell you what, I find him one of the most engaging individuals, really on top of it, knows the project, obviously, that he created inside and out. And he is here with us tonight to be able to do a walkthrough in his own words, to get, so you don't get it just from me, you actually get it directly from the source. And that is Mr. Hitesh Juneja. And I believe I pronounced his name properly. I hope so. Hitesh, I'd like to welcome you to the call, to the Zoom. How are you this evening?
Thank you very much, Kevin. I'm doing great. But no, that was not the right pronunciation, so I'm off. No, that was great. And thank you for that introduction. It was actually quite a bit better than what I was expecting. So thank you. And I am personally very, very excited about this. I think many of the people on this call have either heard of me or have spoken with me in the past. We have been very fortunate to run some of the biggest launches and great projects in the past. And this one is by far, in my opinion, the biggest, the best, the most impactful, and something that you can genuinely be very proud of. I know all of us on this call have, some basic things we all want to achieve. We all want to develop a great financial success story. We also all want to do something that's very impactful and very powerful in the world. And then finally, I think we all want to feel very proud of what we are doing instead of feeling like a salesman selling, makeup to your neighbor or something. So not a knock on anybody who has done really well with that, but generally speaking, most people I speak with, those are the three things they're after. And this particular project is, I think, by far the best thing in line with that. So without much further ado, I'm just going to get started. The Solar Oil Project, the tagline that you see here is that it's not a company. I'll explain exactly why it's not just a company in a moment. Before I go ahead, I just want to clarify, we are going to be talking about a lot of things that deal with financial things, such as the price of oil, movement of the price of oil, operating costs of production of oil, things like that. Want to be very clear. Obviously, this is not any kind of investment or financial advice. This is purely a discussion of different scenarios, walking you guys through an industry. If you want any advice on that, you should speak with somebody who is licensed for all those kind of things. I'm going to be very clear about that, even as we are proceeding with the presentation, that we're not making any kind of representations, guarantees, and things like that. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's talk about the Solar Oil Project, which is not a company. Okay, now there has been a lot of talk about the impact that all of us want to have in the world today. Lots of discussions about environmental issues and the crisis out there. But most of the conversation is directed at things like global warming or the dirt in the ocean, stuff like that, which most of us, frankly, cannot do anything about. It's not very well defined. But there is almost a secret ecological crisis that most people are not aware of, and it is absolutely massive in scale. Okay, and that is the issue of abandoned and underutilized oil wells. Okay, now all of us are familiar with oil. And if you went online and just a very quick research yourself, okay, and I'm going to ask you guys to do a lot of your research during this call and after this call, in addition to what I'm saying, to verify things. There is a tremendous problem with millions of abandoned oil wells that are leaking all sorts of chemicals. They're leaking carbon and methane in some cases and so on, which is becoming a very significant problem. Okay, in fact, this problem is becoming so big and so dangerous that at this point, just in North America alone, $500 billion has been earmarked by the government specifically for cleanup of these oil wells. Okay, $117 billion of that is in Texas alone, which is where I live. So I'm very, very familiar with this issue. So what is this problem exactly? It's actually very simple if you think about it. Most oil wells today are still using inefficient old technology from decades ago in many cases, which every time there's a fluctuation in the price of oil, it's not very profitable. People can't operate them anymore. And because they can't operate them, they just abandon these oil wells. Okay. Sometimes they just switch them off and they move on. In some cases, they don't even bother to switch them off. They just leave them. This has become a very, very big problem because now these wells are contaminating the water, they're contaminating the soil, they're causing carbon and methane pollution, all sorts of stuff. And it's a big burden on the taxpayers. So the Solar Oil project was originally founded to address these problems, specifically using newer technology. And that technology is solar powered eco-friendly pumps. So you basically go out there, it's very, very common sense solution. You replace these old, very large, very expensive machinery with much more modern, elegant solution that is significantly more efficient, that is solar powered, that leads to cleaner environment. And because of this transition, you can revitalize local economies because now all these people who were dependent on oil for their livelihoods can get to work again, and they can get to work removing the old technology, putting the new one in place. Now, this efficiency improvement results in much lower cost of production of oil, which is the driving function behind this platform and why it is so powerfully, potentially profitable for everybody on this call. So Solar Oil project basically takes this massive opportunity that has been created with these millions of oil wells and turns that into something that you can benefit from, that I can benefit from while helping restore the planet. Okay, here's how that works. Solar Oil project goes out there, works with local oil well owners and operators, helps them get this new technology in, replace their old inefficient technology, puts that in place, and then in turn receives revenue from the oil that revenue is local oil wells, because frankly, it's been a major, major issue, but it's been very regional, it's been very local, and people haven't been able to get it addressed properly. So here is how the process works. I'm going to walk through that quickly, and then we'll go into some very specific and interesting details. So the process is very straightforward. Anybody who wants to participate, they go on the website, they create a completely free account. There is never a monthly cost. It's not anything like an auto-ship or something. You just create an account, take your time, look through everything, and then you decide how many SOAX, which is Solar Oil Access Tokens, you want to purchase and stake. Okay. And to make this very easy and to make the barrier of entry as low as possible, you can get started at as little as 200 access tokens, which is basically $20. And then you can stake these tokens. If those of you are familiar with, cryptocurrencies and so on, you know what staking involves. Staking essentially is the idea of you are placing these tokens into a wallet to do a certain job. Over the next 10 years, these oil wells are going to produce oil. And every time they produce oil, they are going to be rewarded to people who are holding these stakes. Every day, when there is a barrel of oil that is produced from one of the oil wells in the portfolio that you're staking on, a new SOPX token is created and issued by the smart contract. And I really want to spend a couple of moments on this because this is a very critical component here. The idea here is to remove human involvement from the whole process. And I'll do this visually in a moment too, just so it's very, very clear. But these are not tokens. The oil tokens are not being issued by a company. It is not being issued by the Solar Oil project saying, oh, there's some oil that came in, you're a participant, here are some tokens, because that involves human error. This particular scenario is where a smart contract receives notification of oil production. A smart contract is basically a piece of code that lives on the blockchain, and it creates the token at that time and issues it directly to the stakeholders. So there is no middleman, there is no person involved in this. There's nobody who can come in here and manipulate it and say, no, I'm going to hold on to the tokens myself. All of this happens in real time. It happens via smart contracts, which is one of the big technological factors that allows this to happen now. Now, these oil tokens can be exchanged for Bitcoin or Ethereum whenever you want. Okay, so there's no restriction, there is no limitation on what you do with these tokens. It's almost as if you were buying oil and you had barrels of oil available to yourself. You can do what you want with it. And this brings me to the next point, which is the way the price of this token is basically determined. The global oil price, the WTI crude price, is what determines the value of these tokens. So there is no company in the background that is making up some random value for the token. I think pretty much everybody on this call has been aware of, if not has a direct experience with companies where they say, oh, buy this token and it's going to be worth more in the future. And there's no rhyme or reason why that is, right? It's just the company arbitrarily tells you what the value is. And that's not the case here. And it can never be the case here, because the value of the token is determined by the price of oil. Price of oil goes up, the value of the token goes up. The price of oil comes down, the value of the token comes down. So you have complete assurance that nobody is just controlling this and doing weird things with it on their own, which obviously leads to a very obvious discussion on, okay, what do we expect the price of oil will be? If my tokens are going to be valued by oil, what is that value? So there are a lot of discussions on this. I'm sure if you look up on the internet, you'll find 100 different opinions on what's going to do. You have places like CNN Business with JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs saying it's going to hit almost $200 per barrel. The expected 10-year average is around 65 to 72. Based on that, here is a very simple example. Okay, so let's say that somebody had 300,000 Solar Oil Access tokens staked. Okay, this is purely an example. And the price of oil was, average price of oil over the next 10 years was $67. So if I was to stake 300,000 tokens today, and the average price of oil over the next 10 years was $67, then we would estimate there would be about 3,832 barrels of oil produced, which you can see on this right-hand side here. And that is a real value of $187,000 plus, right? That is the source of the revenue. That is the source of the rewards that everybody in this project gets to partake in, okay, which is, again, I think a fundamental question that everybody should ask when they become a part of any company. What is the source of revenue? What is the source of value in this particular company? Now, a question that I've gotten often is, well, what about all these electric cars? I drive a Tesla myself. So people are like, what about electric cars? Is oil going to go away in the next 10 years? The answer is absolutely not. Oil is used in all these industries. There is pretty much no risk of oil being eliminated over the next 20 to 30 years. But that's one of the reasons why we structured the entire project as being a 10 to 20 year project, because we are not prophets. I think anybody who claims they know what's going to happen 50 years from now is usually wrong. Let's just say that. Those people are not us. So we would much rather be safe and say, let's structure for the next 10 to 20 years. We know based on this industry is not going away. It's not going anywhere for the next couple of decades. So now that all that basic stuff is done, let's ask a simple question. How do successful oil companies grow? What do they do? What does any successful business do, right? The idea really is, can I take my oil revenue that I generate and use that to go out and expand the number of oil wells I'm earning from? And within the Solar Oil project, we have that capability as well. Okay, so within the platform, you can say, look, I want to take half of my earnings or 75% of my oil production, whatever it may be that you feel comfortable with, and say, look, I want to put this towards acquiring additional access tokens if and when they're available, and keep growing over time. Okay, now all of you know this. This is called the compounding effect. I'm not going to spend forever talking about it, but I did get a lot of questions last time about what this means in a very real sense. Like if I can share some models of what this would look like in terms of owning. So I'm going to digress very quickly from the presentation and just go to this very simple sheet. This is just a model that gives you an idea of what to expect. So let's say that somebody had 100,000 tokens staked, and the average price of oil was just 55, which is significantly below what all the analysts say, but let's just be conservative, okay? In that scenario, we would expect that over the next 10 years, these holdings, the amount of oil that will be produced, will be valued at about $46,000, $47,000, which you can see here, right? Every single month, the total oil value you have derived goes up until 10 years, which is when the staking ends. But if instead you were to say, look, I'm going to take a portion of my oil revenue and put that towards acquiring more of these access tokens and acquiring more of these oil wells, then your actual earnings keep going up because they continue beyond that 10-year mark. So this is what that looks like if you were to simply put that in place and let it go. You end up with somewhere around $480,000. If you were to instead say, let's do 75%, you end up at like $1.5 million. The numbers kind of get crazy over time. Again, I'm not going to spend too much time on this aspect because I think all of you are smart enough to know the implications of let's expand our business constantly. So for those of you who are looking at this going, okay, this is, pretty good numbers. Looks like a really good business, but, I know, a cryptocurrency company number 17 that is offering me 800% per month. Outside of the fact that it's probably not real, it's all of those things. I'm going to ignore that for now. But the reality is, this is a business that is based in reality. It has a real asset behind it. It's going to be around for decades. It can't go away because, in a very real sense, when you participate in this, what you're helping happen out there is that equipment and pumps are being installed in the ground, and they're going to be there for a couple of decades. So even if the solar oil project itself was to say, well, we don't want to do this anymore, doesn't really matter, because the oil is still going to be produced. The smart contract is still going to issue your tokens directly to you. They don't go through the platform. So you don't have to worry about some human being entering in there and messing things up. Okay. Hopefully I haven't beleaguered that point too much, and we can move on to the final point, which is, I think, the reason why most of the people on this call are here, which is, how can we help this initiative grow? How can we help this become more powerful over time? And the answer is simply, the more people that can get involved in this, the faster this goes, the bigger this grows, and so on. So everybody knows the idea of 6 degrees of separation. Everybody around the world is technically connected with just that many steps. And that's where there are 6 degrees of rewards within the Solar Oil platform as well. Now, these are not insanely high rewards that you guys might have seen in other locations, because again, that tends to happen when there's something real behind it. Okay, there are some very real things that the project is working on. So these are what your rewards look like. It's 10% for anybody that you directly refer. When they become a stakeholder, you receive 10% of whatever they staked, and so on and so forth through multiple different levels. Now, again, I'm going to take a quick moment just to show you what the impact of that is. Okay, if you were to simply have one person referred every month, and all they did was purchase, let's say, 5,000 tokens. Okay, in that case, your commission would be $50. If they were buying 50,000 tokens, your commission would be about $500. It's 10% of whatever the value is that they purchase. So if you were to just generate that in commission and put that towards additional staking, additional tokens, this is what that number goes up to. Then your numbers change even more, and it gets much, much bigger. So it's very easy to show big numbers like this, right? Because it's Excel and everybody's like, oh, what does that mean? But the question you should all be asking at this point is, okay, here's a guy making this presentation talking about millions of dollars in potential earnings. Is the market size sufficient to support this? Okay, and hopefully you guys are asking this. I know there's been lots of things out there, and they promise all sorts of things. And when you do some basic math, and hopefully you can tell by my accent, my name, I like math. Genetically, I like math. And you have to do some very basic calculations. Is the market size out there enough to support something like this? So I'm going to do something really quick. Let's go to Wikipedia and look up stripper well production in the United States. Okay, so right here, it says we have stripper wells in United States currently producing about 915,000 barrels of oil per day. Okay, again, unbiased source. Well, I'm not going to get into if it's unbiased or not, but for the purposes of this number, it's actually gone up since this was written. But as of the writing of this article, 950,000 barrels per day of oil is produced by these wells. So let's do some very quick math. 915,000 barrels per day, per year, over 20 years. And let's say that we only averaged $55 per barrel of oil. That's a real value of $367 billion out there. This is a massive, enormous market, and it's not going away anywhere. Now, just to clarify, this number does not include abandoned wells, underutilized wells, wells that are not currently producing that other kind of wells that the solar oil project works with. So the market size is actually much bigger than this. And you can see why a lot of the government entities, state entities, and federal really love what we are doing. They like it because we are solving a problem that currently they will have to spend a lot of money doing, but instead we turn that into revenue for the state and for the taxpayer as well. So returning back to this is why we believe this is probably the most powerful thing that you guys have seen so far. Certainly it's the most powerful and impactful thing I've been involved in, at least the second most. And this is why we can genuinely make the claim this is the first project where you can help heal the world and you can get rewarded for it. And we mean that very literally, right? Not just in like, let's make you feel good and let's get some action. This is very literally a project that is aiming to, and very realistically in a measurable way, is helping heal the world and helps you get rewarded along the way. So like we said, Solar Oil Project is not just a company. It's a true global initiative, and I hope you all will join us in it. Be very happy to answer any additional questions you guys have, or if any additional visual representations are needed.
Well, Hitesh, thank you very much for going through that. That was greatly appreciated. What folks have done throughout the day is sent me some questions, and we've kind of compiled them, and I'll try and go through them. We not too many, so we won't keep you here. I mean, much past midnight. I mean, at pretty much midnight will be pretty much good.
Which time zone are we talking about? I think that will answer the question.
All right. So first off, thank you. That calculator, I think, was very helpful because that's something that a lot of people have been asking about. How do I figure, what does this, the numbers sound good, but I can't picture it in my head. What does it look like 10 years down the road, 15 years down the road? Because so many folks really haven't been looking that far ahead in many of the different things that they've been working on. So thank you very much for sharing that with us.
Of course, you're very welcome. And again, there'll be some tools like this available on the site when it'll go live. So
wonderful. So let me go through a couple of the questions with you. One of the questions, which obviously I know we've discussed in general before, is what is the SOP modeled after that makes it not considered a security?
Sure. Very happy to answer that. Now, by the way, just to clarify, guys, I like when these answers come straight from attorneys instead of me. There will be a complete detailed legal opinion letter on this that will be available on the site for everyone. So it'll be very transparent and publicly available. So the reason behind that is twofold. First, let's talk about the commodity law, which is one area that could apply to this from a regulation perspective. The international commodity law and the US commodity law essentially states that if delivery of a product or on redemption occurs 30 days or higher after the redemption attempt, then it has to comply with all these regulatory bodies, essentially because it becomes a futures contract at that point. That's not applicable here because the moment you say, I want to redeem my production tokens or my oil tokens for its USD value, it happens in real time. It happens at that moment. So that eliminates the international commodities law side. The second is the question of, is this an unlicensed security? Is this a security offering at all? The attorney that we have been working with, the attorneys that we have been working with, but specifically the one who is leading this is the attorney who got the precedent decision on two things from the SEC. One was on a jet company that basically was selling tokenized access to the jets, and the other was a tokenized version of Airbnb. The entire model on this was created to be in compliance exactly with that precedent, so that we can very clearly state, look, when you buy these tokens, what you're receiving is access to these properties. You have the ability to stake on them. And then what you're receiving is a tokenized version of the commodity production from there. So I don't want to spend all my time talking about it because the opinion letter from the attorneys on this will do a much better job than I would. But that's fundamentally a Cliff Notes version of it.
Perfect. Thank you. Again, that was one of the questions I know you and I discussed earlier, and we've heard that
Yep.
from so many people. I wanted folks to hear your explanation of that. So thank you on that. The next one is, what are the companies that have come together to form this project?
Definitely. So there are actually quite a few different companies in this. One of those is a companies that I'm partnered in. Okay, I'm not one of the owners or partner of the solar oil project itself. I am one of the partners in one of the companies that actually helps get these oil wells revitalized, and we actually do some of the oil supplying and so on. So I'm very intimately aware of the process that happens in the background, like what's been going on for many years now, actually, before this project was even around. There are multiple different manufacturers of these pumps. There are pneumatic pump manufacturers and there are PCP pump manufacturers. Obviously, there are solar panel manufacturers involved. But the most critical component of this is the local oil well operators and the oil well owners. And those are constantly increasing in numbers, right? Because as the project expands, the number of oil well owners who can say, look, I have a field with 800 wells on it, and maybe 300 of those wells fit the parameters that we can go in and help them. In that case, we would add another 300 wells to the portfolio, and we would be working with that particular owner. So there are a lot of people in this. What I'm really looking forward to is the site going live, and then maybe doing some follow-up Q&As with the actual management team behind Solar Oil Project, such as Will Marshall and so on, who are guys who have been in the oil and gas business for decades, manage funds in the hundreds of millions specifically for these kind of developments, chemical engineers and mechanical engineers by trade, things like that. So I'm actually looking forward to having those calls where we can bring some of those guys out who help manage this project as a whole. But I think I do an okay job reeling basic information, but I would like to have those guys answer some of the more details on this.
Well, that would be great. Obviously, one of the questions folks are asking about is sharing the experience of the corporate team. I think you just addressed that, and I think you already have mentioned that's going to be on the website. There's going to be full bios of the folks that are involved. So that's great. Another question: other than Bitcoin and Ethereum, will other methods of purchasing tokens be available?
It is not planned at the moment, because Bitcoin and Ethereum are very stable. You have easy access to those two by most of the people. The SOAX and the SOPX tokens are both ERC20 tokens, which means they are Ethereum blockchain-based tokens. That's why there's good Ethereum support. But Bitcoin is the easiest for anybody to be able to buy and participate and become a part of this. We considered other cryptocurrencies as well, but it just makes it more complex. It complicates everything. Plus, it actually adds a lot of confusion because a lot of people just don't know how to get those currencies. It's essentially not necessary at the moment.
Makes sense. So one of the next question was approximately, how will people earn? Obviously, you went through through that pretty well with that calculator. That was great. If people are trying to break down how much they can earn daily or weekly or something like that, is that something that's going to be on the calculator as well?
Yeah, I mean, we'll share some different scenarios, but remember that your earnings are directly dictated by the price of oil at the moment that you're redeeming it, right? So it makes a lot of sense if you simply think of it in terms of real oil, okay? So when you produce oil from the ground, let's say that I produced oil from the ground and you came to me and said, I want to buy this oil, okay? Or this oil belongs to me because, I helped bring this oil out. So in that case, you are the stakeholder. I've pulled the oil out of the ground, and I will now give you this barrel of oil. Now you have two options. You can say, I want you to truck this over to my warehouse and put it there. And that's what we call transfer of SOPX. You have that ability in the back office. You can say, I want my production tokens moved to my own Ethereum wallet, and I'm going to hold on to it. That's your prerogative. If instead you say, I want to get the current value of this oil, okay, I want to get the value of this in a real sense, in Bitcoin or Ethereum value of it, at that time, it would look at what is the current price of oil, and it'll subtract $18 from it. So if the current value of oil is $60, then you would receive $42 for that barrel of oil because it costs about $18 to produce that barrel of oil. Okay, so that's basically how the math is done. So every single time the price of oil goes up or down, you know what the price of your token is in proportion to that. Now, if you were to say, I want to sell this, really what you're saying is, I want to destroy this barrel of oil. I want to convert it into all the byproducts, refine it into all these different things, and get paid the dollar value for it. And that's what happens on the token side as well. The SOPX token, when you say I convert this to Bitcoin and send it to me, that token is destroyed. It is never reused and it cannot be reused. So you can actually go look at the code on the smart contract that confirms that is what's happening. That tokens are only created when oil is pulled out of the ground, and tokens are destroyed when that oil is also sold. So it makes sure that the economy, if you will, the token economy stays very stable. And at the same time, it makes sure there's nobody messing around back there. Nobody's saying we'll artificially create and distribute these tokens, right? Because that would make invalidate the whole thing. So there are some pretty good steps that have been taken in this to make sure there is good confidence in the general public, there's transparency so everybody can see it, and there's very clear understanding of where the value is coming from.
Wonderful. Thank you. So you've talked a little bit about who's purchasing the oil. You work directly with a company that purchases it.
There are multiple midstream, and some of this is, and the reason why I really wanted to have somebody like Will talk about it is because it sounds much more intelligent coming from somebody who has done it for 30 years. But there are a whole host of companies that are midstream companies. Their job is to buy oil, refine the oil or add some value, sell it to other providers beyond that, and so on. So most of the time, before you start working on a field, before you go in and start reactivating these oil wells, you already have those relationships in place who will say, well, I'll purchase up to 15,000 barrels of oil per day from this one particular field. And that's exactly how it works. So one of the fields that we're looking at in Texas, for example, or not we are, but not the solar oil project, but one of the local operators, when they are looking at a field in Texas, they go and talk to other midstream suppliers and say, will you buy oil from this field? And they then basically negotiate and discuss what the terms would be on that. But all of that is taken care of before the project moves forward. So will the oil sell or not is actually the least of the concerns. That's almost never a question in this entire equation.
Wonderful. So obviously we're assuming that the companies pay for the oil in dollars. That seems to be
absolutely.
I'm correct.
Trust me, nobody right? drives up to the wellhead and says, here's some Bitcoin for you. It's all USD.
Okay, so we're on the same page there. So one of the things that, and I think I reached out to you earlier about this, and you had a great answer to it, and I'd love to hear you share it with the folks. If the oil has already been sold and someone's still holding an SOPX token, how are they able to sell it for more or for less at a later date, whether it's a week or two or a month or two from then?
Yeah. So look, that's something that we call the area of expertise of the SAM of the company, SAM being the speculative asset manager. So all companies do this, by the way. All oil companies, actually all commodity production companies do this. If they mine for gold and silver, for example, they do this particular thing where they take futures and derivative positions to offset that risk for themselves, right? That's what they do internally. That's what happens here as well. But also that risk completely goes away once this production token, which is a commodity-backed token, once it's on other major exchanges. At that point, this risk is entirely gone. I mean, it doesn't matter if the platform is around or not, because you will still get your tokens and you can still liquidate those tokens on external exchanges if you would like. So there's a lot that goes on in the background to make sure that's not a risk on the side of the oil well producer. But basically that falls under SAM. And once you have these tokens on other exchanges, that's never a risk. I mean, look, everything in life has a risk, but there are a lot of steps that have been taken here to eliminate all of these tertiary risks from the equation. Obviously, there's the risk the price of oil goes down, right? We all have that risk. But outside of that, almost everything else has been managed quite well.
Very good, very good. And you just touched on it briefly. One of the questions is, on what exchanges are the tokens traded? And I know that you have plans for that as we go.
Correct. There are plans for it. I don't want to mislead anybody and say we are on this exchange. That all of that is a function of how many of these tokens end up in circulation, right? When there's enough in circulation, there's enough demand and activity happening on it, it makes it very easy to go to major exchanges that have good liquidity and say, We need you to be basically the market makers for this, and we want to list it on your exchanges. So that's something that is part of the roadmap. Obviously, day one, when it's launched, it will not be on any of those exchanges, and it'll go there over time.
Great. Can you just briefly discuss the portfolios and how people decide? Because some of them are saying, well, how do I know if, do I pick this well over here or that well?
You don't
over
pick,
there?
yeah, let me address that. So this is made very easy for you. You don't have to go in and try to determine yourselves which oil well am I going to work with. Oil wells are collected into big portfolios. Each portfolio straight up tells you how much oil it is expected to produce on a daily basis. This portfolio, for example, might have 200 wells in it, and it's going to produce 400 to 500 barrels of oil per day. Another portfolio might have 100 wells, but it's expected to produce 500 to 700 barrels of oil. And how many tokens can be staked on it and how many tokens can be supported on it is basically a function of how much oil is going to be produced off of them. So when you go into the back office of the site, you will almost always only have one or two portfolio options, because all of the development happens only on one or two portfolios. Once those portfolios are done, when those fields have been done, then you move on to the next ones, right? That's just how everything is done in the real world. So I think what's going to happen is once the site is launched and everything is live, a lot of these questions are going to be very naturally answered when people go through it. They'll realize, oh, this is all already addressed. And a lot of the FAQs on the site actually address a lot of the things we're discussing, which I'm happy to answer these. But I'm just letting you guys know that this is all the information that will be very publicly available, specifically to make sure everybody has good level of confidence and transparency.
Wonderful. And I think a great question, one of the people sent through, actually, we got 2 or 3 copies of it because it's been texted to me as well. They're saying, they understand that, as the money goes in, that a certain amount goes to commissions, and then...
Yep. So this breakdown is actually on the site
right,
of exactly where the money goes. It's on
right,
the site.
But the overall question is they want to make sure also that there is profit there for the people that are running it.
Nope. There is not profit for the people that are running the solar oil project. So let's make this very, very clear. The solar oil project does not derive income or profit from token sales. They derive their profit from the production of oil. Okay, so that's done to eliminate the conflict of interest. If they were making a lot of money from selling tokens, then they would focus on selling tokens and not necessarily developing a lot more fields, right? That means they would have artificial costs they could add in there. So this was one of our discussions internally, right? So I'm one of the co-owners on a company that provides the oil services. So I want to make sure that the company that is coming in, paying for this equipment, in this case, solar oil project, when they come and do that, they are not marking it up 2x or 3x, because that beats the whole point. I mean, that defeats the purpose of the project. The purpose of the project is to, at a low cost, rehab these old wells and get production going. So this is actually going to be on the site as well. It very clearly states that the solar oil project does not make money from token sales. It makes its money on a spread on the oil production itself. So they are very heavily incentivized to get as much oil production going as possible.
Well, I'll tell you, that's some very, very in-depth information. I want to thank you very much for sharing that tonight with us and sharing your time. It's been greatly appreciated. One of the final questions, and I mean, this pretty much there's a lot of folks hanging on the edge of their seats here, would like to know when we're going to be able to really jump and obviously we've gotten to work and we've been sharing this and there's a lot of people waiting on the edge of their seats here. But when are we going to be able to really dig our heels in and get started and sharing links and all that?
That is the one question that I cannot give you a clear answer for, as opposed to everything else. The reason why I'm not going to give you a clear answer is I would hate to tie up the company to a timeline that I gave out there. So I'm actually going to wait for them to give me the timeline and announce it. Now, I know that we're extremely close. I know on a different call, I showed you guys the back office and we kind of went through it. So from the platform being ready perspective, it's very much there. Okay, I have a demo account that I've gone through and it looks great. But there are a lot of audits. This is one of the good things. So the management team behind this is not a marketing group, and it is not a network marketing group especially. these are all seasoned, all in well professionals. They're oil and gas professionals. These guys are not going to get anything get anything live until they have done like 20 different tests to make sure it's going to be perfectly done and it's going to work properly, especially because there are a lot of sensitivities around the smart contract, making sure it's not hackable, making sure that it sends the production directly to people's wallets, things like that. So I know that's the phase they are in. They are basically in the final testing phases right now. So it's not far. It's imminent, but at the same time, I don't want to announce a date without having that firmly confirmed by the company.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Any parting words, any questions you think that we should have asked that we didn't, that you want to throw an answer out there just to make sure that we have it?
I think you probably should have asked me the question of how easy is the process for somebody to purchase these tokens, because we talked about Bitcoin and Ethereum, but the way the platform is designed, it's designed to allow the average person to just sign up using their phone. So it shows a QR code. You can scan it with your camera, or you can just click on the button, send your Bitcoin, and you're done. You can do that with probably 20 different apps that you can do on your phone. I think Cash App, BitPay, and so on. It's extremely easy. The idea here really is to make this as accessible to the average person as possible. And other than that, I think the only thing I want to say about this is I have been involved in plenty of projects offline and online. This is the only project that I'm aware of, at least in the last 10 years, that has very real impact, that has very real value that is being created for everybody, and that has the level of transparency where you can be very confident in what's happening and why it's being done that way, and so on. It's very easy to verify if any of the things that have been talked about are real, right? And I really encourage all of you guys to go online and just type in something like abandoned well pollution or abandoned well problems and see what is going on out there. It's very easy to verify all of the things that are being talked about, right? This is not somebody saying, I have a magical trading algorithm and I make like all this money for you. It's nothing like that. It's very real. And I think this gives everybody the vehicle for all of what all of us want. We want to build something that is, we can leave to our children and grandchildren. We can build a big legacy out of it. We have something that we know is stable. It's not going away anywhere. And you finally have a home for at least 10 years. Everybody says, I want my next company to be my home. Well, this is your home, even if you don't want it to be your home, because it's going to be paying you for the next 10 years at least. So that's all I have to say about it. I'm really thankful for having been invited on this call. And thank you for all your great questions.
Well, I'll tell you, it's been a pleasure, and looking forward to not only having yourself back, but if you have the ability to bring some of the other gents on the line, I'd love to arrange that for sometime during this week.
We definitely will do that.
All right, wonderful. Thank you very much, Hitesh. Again, thank you for joining us. Folks, this is an amazing, obviously you can see and hear an amazing opportunity in front of us. This is, as it says, not a company, it's a global initiative. This is an amazing project. Let's get just rocking and rolling. Folks, we're doing Project 5000. Let's get 5,000 people involved this week. Let's get it rocking. We'll see you tomorrow at noon, same place. We're going noon, 3, 6, and 9 again tomorrow. Have a great night, everybody.